So what happens with publicity? Publicity is designed only to affect trust. And there's 5 reasons when we go and buy a product or service, or we give referrals, that will do it. The number one is always trust, and then it can either be price, proximity, quality, or service, depending on what business you're in. So that's after there's a perceived need. Now that's the big problem with the attorneys, is there's not a perceived need for chiropractic care. That's the big need. So there's a huge opportunity, but I call it, they're in a state of unconscious incompetence for the perceived need. So there's not a perceived need. It's there, but they just don't know it. That's why publicity doesn't work, because when you look at the formula, publicity only affects trust. Well, there has to be a perceived need for that to work, and there's no perceived need. And so you go to, let's go to advertising now. Same thing with advertising. Advertising affects the obstacles and the service factors or trust. So it affects more, but it doesn't affect need. So once again, if your target market doesn't have a perceived need, it doesn't matter. The analogy that I give all the time is like if you were driving, if you wanted seafood, you were hungry. In other words, there was a perceived need for food, and you were hungry and you wanted seafood. And I always say, well, how many steak restaurants will you pass? You'll pass all of them. The advertising is their sign. That's advertising. You'll pass all the advertisements. They won't mean anything to you until you see the seafood. That's essentially what's going on with the attorneys. So there's a huge need. They're hungry. They just don't have it for chiropractic because they're in a state of unconscious incompetence. And you go, well, why is that? Well, there's many reasons why, but to cut it down, it's the same reason that 92% of the population doesn't pick chiropractic, even though 3 out of 4 of them have a chiropractic problem. So there's confusion. They don't think they can help. And for the few attorneys that have worked with chiropractors, it's usually been a bad experience with documentation. There you go. So there's no need for any of that.